What's more, the many offshoots of social Darwinism, such as humanism and communism, all trace their rotten fruit back to the same philosophical seed of this assumed Copernican principle. Once you have eyes to see, you can go back through each chapter of the development of modern scientific thought and trace the steps of how this amorphous thing we now often refer to as scientism gradually spread through Europe and the supposedly Christianized world and systematically attacked every tenet of biblical Christianity, one piece at a time. Like a Trojan horse, the Copernican revolution actually served to inject the precepts of evolution and scientific materialism into cultures which didn't seem to realize where it would all eventually lead. But what's even more amazing is that today in our modern information age, with all the historical resources at our disposal, we seem to appreciate the centuries-long agenda of spiritual subterfuge even less. While millions of people today have the convictional fortitude to question the lie of evolution, despite the fact that the institutions of government and academia all parade it as unquestionable fact, there remains an intellectual and perhaps psychological break between being able to retain a belief in intelligent design and going so far as to question the entirety of all that we are taught to be established scientific fact. Perhaps it is because on some deep subconscious level, there is the realization that a willingness to entertain the idea that Darwinism and Copernicanism are completely symbiotic and inseparable would then mean that having to extricate oneself from a vast succession of phony paradigms and monolithic entrenched false knowledge. It would mean standing apart from the world to a degree that virtually none of us ever imagined having to even consider. It would mean that not only is Darwinism a false premise, but that everything that is said to be established by such giants as Newton, Galileo, and Einstein is also rubbish, because it has all been built layer by layer upon that same underlying philosophical scaffold of Copernicanism. It just becomes too much, too crazy, too massive of a deception to be able to process. Unless you can allow yourself to accept what the Bible says about how the deceptions allowed to be leveled upon humanity are not drawn from the mere imaginations of mortal men. The lie of evolution is part of a spiritual agenda, which is many millennia in the making. To try and battle against this lie of evolution, while simultaneously defending the precepts of broader Copernican materialistic cosmology, is like trying to eradicate a weed by cutting off the leaves while protecting the root. It defies reason. It is ultimately a scenario motivated by pride and fear rather than faith and logic. The Bible tells us that the earth is fixed and immovable, many times and in many places, and it tells us this for good reason, not for the sake of mere intellectual curiosity, but as a devastating blow against this entire false satanically inspired evolutionary materialistic system which engulfs us today. You simply cannot divorce evolution from Copernicanism. Once Satan's counterfeit of God's truth of an earth-centered geocentric universe gained control of higher education, the way was clear to foist this evolutionary counterfeit into the corridors of academia with very little opposition. The road had already been paved. Copernicans Voltaire and Erasmus Darwin, Charles's grandfather, were developing an ape-man theories in the 1700s. By the time lawyer Sir Charles Lyell came along with his uniformitarian geology in 1830, evolutionary ideas were fermenting in many universities, awaiting only Darwin's natural selection mechanism to uncork the bottle. Is it really any shock that virtually all early proselytizers of evolution were all avowed Copernicans, having just received that great quantum leap in wisdom from their grandfathers? What we find is that philosophers and other intellectuals, all Copernicans, from Descartes, Spinoza, and Leibniz, through Kant and Hegel, on to Schopenhauer and later to Nietzsche, had established the heliocentric cosmology so solidly over a 300-year period in the universities and publication circles, that even the famous scientist von Humboldt was cowed into silence. Just before Darwin's book came out in 1859, Humboldt said, "I have known too for a long time that we have no arguments for the Copernican system." Still, fear of a scorn of a thoughtless multitude prevented him from saying anything. Thus, secure from any credible attack on their Copernican science, The Darwinian science offensive could then link hands with the established scientific truth of a rotating, orbiting Earth and forge boldly ahead towards the goal of pushing the Bible completely off the stage as a repository of truth. Ernst Haeckel was a powerful force in the establishment of Darwinism. Ernst Haeckel wedded the idea of classical physics, Copernicanism, with the new Darwinian history of nature to form a comprehensive, materialistic cosmology, or anti-theology. This very comprehensive materialist cosmology is what we are up against today, and excepting a handful, most of us don't even realize this. Evolutionism does not stand alone as a Bible-wrecking, contra-scientific deception. No, evolutionism is historically, philosophically, scientifically, and spiritually wedded to a previously conceived Bible-wrecking contra-scientific deception called Copernicanism. The creation movement today denies or ignores this wedded union and thus is not nearly the threat to Satan's kingdom in the world that it can and should be.
I think that awakening many people in the church, just like for years before a lot of these great creation ministries such as Ken Hovind or Ken Ham, for a long time you were ridiculed and laughed at if you didn't believe in evolution, right? But now there's a growing number of people in the church that do not believe in evolution, and they stand with science based on the fact that there is a lot of evidence to support the fact that we are indeed on a young, Earth and these type of things. So I think this moving in and drawing the parallels and also looking at the root, where did evolution come from? It came from the Big Bang. But I think, getting people thinking about, well, the whole Copernicus system, or even before that, like, why is it you believe in the solar system and billions of galaxies, and where does that come from? Why do you believe that? Is it because of NASA? Is it because of what scientism has told you?
But regarding the nature of creation, I think it represents everything opposite to what we are being told now from supposed wise men and scholars. If a Christian doesn't, in fact, see that, I think that's very troubling. But I think a lot of Christians would rather not address it. I think many Christians know that there is so much wrapped up in deception in these re-education institutions is what they are.
So for it to work, the devil has to put, his motivation is to put things in place over centuries to get us to be softened up enough to believe it, But, later over time, 1,500 years ago, I love that quote from Men in Black,
1,500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was the center of the universe. 500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was flat. And 15 minutes ago, you knew that people were alone on this planet.
Imagine what you'll know tomorrow.
Imagine what we're going to know tomorrow. It's a great line.
I see it as something that needs to be in place in order for the future lie that's going to come, that's going to deceive mankind.
I mean, prayer out of schools, creation's not allowed to be taught in schools. Every museum you go to, every movie you watch, every TV show you watch, it's evolution everywhere you look. And evolution, breeds people who question or, become agnostic or atheist and throw God out.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day.
We see these terms as metaphorical, the terms that I'm going to cover tonight. We look at them, when the Old Testament says something like that the sky is supported by pillars. Oh, that's just metaphorical. It's just poetic. To us it is, and you know why? Because we have a scientific worldview. That's why. They didn't. They were serious. Okay, it wasn't until the 15th century that we have, the whole issue resolved of, can you sail this way and come out the other? The whole idea about the Earth being a globe and all that kind of stuff, that was debated up into the 15th century. We look at that and go, oh, it's just poetic. It is to us. But what I'm going to say is, again, back to my introduction, if you take it literally, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. They were serious about it. All these concepts and even some of the terms are part of ancient Near Eastern cosmology. In other words, what I'll show you tonight, the division of the world, what the world looks like in Israelite cosmology, you can find the same descriptions anywhere else. Egypt, Mesopotamia, ancient Syria, the Hittites, whatever. Because this was a common worldview. This is a three-tiered cosmology. There's God. We're going to see it in the verses I'll show you that God lives above the vault of heaven, the firmament. And in the firmament you have windows and doors. And you have the earth. We're going to see verses that talk about the ends of the round, flat earth here. Underneath is Sheol. Sheol can be both the grave, and it can also be the underworld. Okay? It's not quite hell, but it's sort of like hell. We can talk a little bit about it. And then underneath that, we have the great deep. These are all scriptural terms that are on this map. This is what an Israelite, an Egyptian would have had different terms, but the same three-tiered level. Same with the Mesopotamians. Now they have, theologically, they have dramatically different views of what's going on here. Not just who made it, but what's going on. Views of afterlife, the value of humanity. I mean, it's dramatically different. And I've made the comment before, Genesis is about theological messaging. And there are some dramatic differences in what Israel is saying, the Bible is saying, and anything else. So let's take a look at the parts. Waters above and below the heavens. Genesis 1:6, God said, let there be an expanse. Some translations have firmament. It's rakia in Hebrew. In the midst of the waters. And let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse, the rakia, and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And what was that expanse called? Heaven. The heavens, the sky, Shemayim in Hebrew. So you have here the sky, okay, and you have waters above the sky, and of course you've got waters below down here, but then you have the atmospheric heavens as well. Psalm 148 mentions the waters that are above the heavens. That's after the flood. Did you catch that? Because a lot of people want to say, oh, the waters above, they went away with the flood. See, the firmament was this canopy thing, and it was there, and then the flood, it just went away. No, it wasn't. According to the psalmist, he's still referring to it. Proverbs 8, when he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep. Isn't that interesting? We'll get to that. Circle on the face of the deep. When he made firm the skies above. Made firm is amatz in Hebrew. It is the same verb for letting a tree grow firm, hard. Ancient cosmology across the board believed that the sky was this dome over the earth, and it was solid.
And solid, keeping the liquids separated. So it's really intriguing because when we're getting into the science of this, but again, Job 37:18, has thou with him spread out the sky, which is strong, and as molten looking glass. So molten looking glass is giving a transparency. This is obviously a see-through to some degree, and it's fantastically exciting.
And this actually, we can link this very verse also with the book of Isaiah chapter 40 verses 22.
Yeah, correct.
Right? Where it says it is he, the Lord God Almighty, who sits above the circle of the earth, and he sees the inhabitants of the earth are as grasshoppers. So he looks down in order for God to be able to see right through, to be able to see us. Sure, I know God is omnipresent, he is omnipotent, but for just what, like the description here is describing a glass-looking material. In other words, it's a shield, it's a protective layer that God created, and it's basically transparent. Glass is transparent. So this firmament is transparent, right? And so that is what it is, and it's solid, of course. Now we're just looking at it, we're taking it straight how the Bible describes it, this is exactly how we're going to take it.
I mean, and there has to be some sort of physicality to the firmament or expanse in other translations, because again, it is dividing the waters from the waters, and then we get into the account of the flood. You've got the fountains of the deep breaking open, from below, and then you've got the windows of heaven that were opened, right? So, some people will look at the flood account as it was just raining. Well, it's a clear indication, biblically speaking, that there was, two other water sources that were occurring.
Of Martin Luther, we Christians must be different from the philosophers in the way we think about the causes of these things. And if some are beyond our comprehension, like those before us concerning the waters above the heavens, we must believe them and admit our lack of knowledge rather than either wickedly denying them or presumptuously interpret them in conformity with our understanding. Now that was talking about the waters above the heavens. I mean, this is how detailed these men went.
And God said,
"Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters."
And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day.
When you read Genesis and you come to this conclusion, your whole worldview literally changes. The whole idea of a global idea is completely smashed. It's obliviated. It doesn't matter anymore because it's never been the truth. You have to understand, without a globe model, there could have never been a Big Bang. Our universe, our solar system, everything hinges to bring us to how we came to be with evolution. You have to follow this train of thought all the way back, not just stop at evolution. Billions and billions of years ago, we're told. But no, we're a young Earth creationist, we'll say. It's like 6,000 years. Great. Let's talk about the universe.
The main thing that I saw, which caused a lot of people, that actually was a heated debate or discussion, was the firmament. That was the one that struck me. And I was trying to wrap my head up around it, and I was thinking, you know what? Maybe the firmament is somewhere out there, we just don't know where it is, only God knows. And I even began to question, I began to say, you know what? Maybe the firmament isn't really what the Bible was, it seemed like the Bible was describing. Maybe there's something else. And it all had to do with the globe that we've been told.
A lot of stuff going on right there. So let's look at the word firmament. Strong's number 7549, it's the word rakia. We see that it's an expanse, that it is solid. It is beaten out. When you see in the book of Job, it is a solid structure. Some say as of ice. A support base. We see that it's holding up God's throne. So it is regarded by the Hebrews as solid, supporting the waters above, in the verses that you see there in the Brown's Driver Briggs Concordance. When you look at Job 37:18, you see in multiple English translations a variety of ways of describing this thing, but all essentially saying the same thing. This is a hard structure, a mirror cast of bronze, a bronze mirror, a cast metal mirror, molten looking glass in the King James. This is a hard structure up there. When we look at the sky in Amos chapter 9, verse 6, it talks about a vaulted dome. It's a different word used there, aguda, if I'm pronouncing that right, a structure fitted together. But we see in Ezekiel that this structure, this firm structure, there was a likeness of the throne on top of it. We see likewise in Isaiah 66:1, heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. There's something firm up there upon which his throne is sitting. We see in Genesis 1:8, he called the firmament, the rakia, the beaten down metallic structure, heaven, Shemaim. It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers. And he stretcheth out the heavens, the Shemaim, as a curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in. Now, in the context of Isaiah's time, tent, this is what you might consider like a Bedouin tent structure, probably more like something like this, a yurt which is found throughout multiple cultures in the ancient world, or even today we might look at as something like this, a dome tent. Regardless of which idea of a tent you look at, this is what they're saying, that the heavens are stretched out like a tent. So we have the word like or as being a metaphor, right? But tents are always stretched out over a flat surface. Interesting. So we continue. What's placed inside the tent? Genesis 1, beginning in verse 9. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass, and herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. How did the dry land appear? Genesis just says the dry land appeared. But when we go through the Old Testament texts of the prophets,